Well, the weekend certainly didn't cool things off over the Mueller report or the various probes into all things Trump. Washington Post says the president and his allies, they are working to block more than 20 separate investigations by the Democrats. And that includes everything from Donald Trump's business activities to administration policies about things like immigration and the emergency declaration, as well as, of course, those tax returns. Now, of course, one of the biggies is all the battles over the Mueller report. Then there is the former White House counsel Don McGahn. The Judiciary Committee subpoenaed McGahn for documents as well as testimony, but the White House, they've told McGahn not to comply. Now, Nadler is threatening McGahn with contempt. Now, that's not the only news involving Mr. McGahn. New York Times is now reporting the president, he told White House officials to instruct McGahn to say publicly that he, the president, did not obstruct justice. McGahn declined such request. Now, that reportedly got the president very angry as he felt his counsel was being disloyal. Joining us now, former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. And Gene, every time I think, imagine if I'm the attorney at Trump. Now, however, somehow, some way, I ducked a bullet here. Mueller report comes out and there isn't a knockout punch. It seems every day we learn he's doing his level best to remind everybody what obstruction of justice looks like. Now we hear he's telling McGahn, tell him there's no there. I mean, now you're trying to send Rudy to the Ukraine. I'll get into that in a second. It's almost like they're trying to be the Keystone Cops.
This is a combination, Richard, of whack-a-mole and the last stand at the Alamo. I mean, every other day there's a new legal issue, and it just amazes me that we are at this point in history.
You know, Rudy, the idea, I mean, let's remember 2016, the whole idea was, did the Russians and Trump conspire? There's all these unanswered questions about why exactly Trump is the only guy not condemning the Russians. His own intelligence agency said, the Kremlin had their fingerprints all over the hacking, etc. And then we saw the embarrassment in Helsinki. I don't have to relive the history for everybody. You have all that as a backdrop. Now you got Rudy not only saying he's going out to the Ukraine, but he's talking publicly about, hey, it's maybe not illegal, but I am going out there to meddle. And only now are they saying, never mind. I mean, what are they thinking? And again, to investigate and trying to get the Ukrainians to help him investigate a political potential rival in 2020. Again, Gene, maybe there's a political strategy I'm missing here, but isn't that obstruction of justice?
Let me tell you, it's not only possible obstruction of justice, it's potential criminal exposure for Mr. Giuliani and the President of the United States. The president allegedly is asking Rudy Giuliani to violate the Logan Act, to violate crimes involving interference in our democracy. It's coming close to the water's edge. It absolutely befuddles me. I think what happened with Mr. Giuliani is, after he said he was going to Ukraine, where Paul Manafort was having a field day, by the way, this was not a good thing optically, politically, but it also raises legal issues that could put Mr. Giuliani's bar license at risk.
Now we get to, Gene, Congress, where I saw a recent piece and it reminded what William Cohen, then a Republican lawmaker on the Hill out of Maine, he broke with Republican ranks in '73 and said, you know what, no, we need to see the tapes here, even of a fellow Republican, Richard Nixon, and that got the ball rolling, and we know how that ended with Watergate. Today you got Lindsey Graham. Now, for people who don't know what a judge is, he was a guy who doesn't just talk about the law, he lived the law, was a prosecutor back in South Carolina and everything else. He's now telling Donald Trump Jr. to ignore what he calls a partisan witch hunt by Congress and not appear even though he was subpoenaed. Well, the head of the Intelligence Committee, it's run by Republicans. Senator Burr is the one running the committee who issued the subpoena. But more than that, I want to remind everybody the Lindsey Graham of today who says that versus the Lindsey Graham of 1998 when there was a Democrat president who said this about the role of Congress.
Article 3 of impeachment against Richard Nixon, the article was based on the idea that Richard Nixon, as president, failed to comply with subpoenas of Congress. Congress was going through its oversight function to provide oversight of the president. When asked for information, Richard Nixon chose not to comply, and the Congress back in that time said, "You're taking impeachment away from us. You're becoming the judge and jury. It is not your job to tell us what we need. It is your job to comply with the things we need to provide oversight over you." The day Richard Nixon failed to answer that subpoena is the day that he was subject to impeachment, because he took the power from Congress over the impeachment process away from Congress, and he became the judge and jury.
So now you got 20 years and change, and it's like somebody took over Lindsey Graham. But my point is, it speaks to the very essence of the premise is Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government. Their job is oversight. The Lindsey Graham of today, and frankly, a lot of members of his party, they believe the president should decide when subpoenas get answered, who should be allowed to answer questions before Congress, etc. To me, this isn't just a clown car. This is scary issues, Gene, as relates to checks and balances.
Well, Richard, I also would hope that at another segment, we could play the Lindsey Graham of 2015 or 2016 and play some of the clips that Lindsey Graham said about the integrity of Donald Trump. It was absolutely vicious and ugly. And now we got Lindsey Graham, who frankly is an apologist for the president. And you hit the nail on the head, Richard. This is about whether the president is a co-equal or he is Louis XIV. The king is not the law is the king. I think that was Thomas Paine. And this whole scenario about saying that subpoenas are not going to be complied with, as a former 3-decade prosecutor, subpoenas are the lifeblood of not only the Department of Justice, but of the oversight ability of Congress. And if you take away the subpoenas, you've taken away all their power.
Gene, obviously, your focus is the law. You handled obvious prosecution, but there's also a politics to it. And when you have multiple charges or multiple investigations, you have to have a prioritization going on. Right now, Democrats have as many as 20 different investigations, multiple people that they want to have come testify. If you were going to give them free legal advice and say, make this first prize right now, would you say focus on Mueller? He's an unimpeachable witness that can at least speak truth to power. Make this the primary thing instead of going off in 20 directions? Or do you think they should do all these things simultaneously?
That's an outstanding question. What the Congress is doing with these 20 investigations, it's what sometimes prosecutors do. They load up an indictment with all these charges. I call them spaghetti indictments. You throw it at the wall and hope one sticks. What they should do is focus on 3 or 4 investigations, obviously Mueller, obviously McGahn. I think the tax issue, the tax returns, that's a layup and a slam dunk, and maybe one other, the financial services and Deutsche Bank. But the other 16 or 15 investigations, you are diluting your message, and you look as though you're that character in Les Miserables. Jean Valdon, I guess it was. You're just trying to persecute the president, and they have to be very careful.
Well, we're going to see here because I got to make some decisions sooner than later. But my God, we got enough cultural references to last us for a week. Gene, great job as always, my friend. Thank you for a few.
Thank you. Thank you.
And speaking of cultural references and also the GOP, if you missed Saturday Night Live, you missed a really funny but also very telling clip. It had to do with how the Grand Ole Party is enabling President Trump. We're going to show you why this isn't just a laughing matter.